My name is Hannah. I'm 25 years old. People always said I was the quiet one, the one who never argued, who always followed traditions just to keep the peace. So when my dad smiled at me this year and said, "Traditions are for parents, you can skip this year," I smiled right back. I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I simply packed my bags and flew to Europe. While they gathered for their usual family traditions, I was standing under the Eiffel Tower, finally living for me. But when they saw the photos, my smile, my freedom, my peace, their phones wouldn't stop lighting up. Text after text, call after call. And suddenly, the silence they wanted from me was gone. Before I share what happened next, please like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And don't forget to subscribe, because the story that follows will make you realize sometimes breaking tradition is the best tradition of all. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, the same cozy scent that always filled our living room every December. The Christmas lights blinked softly across the old tree in the corner, the one my parents had been dragging out for as long as I could remember. Mom was humming while arranging ornaments, and Dad sat on the couch with his coffee, scrolling through his phone like always. It should have felt comforting, but that night, something was different. Maybe it was me. I just started my first full-time job. Long hours, endless meetings, and this constant pressure to prove I wasn't just the kid anymore. But no matter how grown up I tried to be, at home, I still felt like the same little girl they hovered over. I hesitated before speaking. "Hey, Dad, I might not make it for tree decorating this weekend. Work's been crazy, and He didn't even look up. He just smiled and said, "Traditions are for parents. You can skip this year." He laughed a little, like it was nothing. But to me, it wasn't nothing. His words hit harder than he'd ever know. I forced a small smile, pretending it didn't bother me. "Right," I said softly, even though my chest ached. Mom didn't even notice. She just said, "It's okay, honey. We'll manage. Focus on your job." And that was it. The topic dropped. No one looked at me again, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. For years, that tradition had meant everything to me. The lights, the cookies, the quiet laughter that made our house feel alive. I thought those moments mattered. But hearing my dad say I could skip it felt like being told I didn't matter anymore. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My phone screen glowed in the dark as I scrolled through photos of friends traveling abroad. One of them was ice skating in Vienna. Another was exploring Christmas markets in Germany. Everyone looked so free, like they were building lives of their own. And then there was me, stuck in the same loop, pretending not to care that my own family barely noticed when I pulled away. I opened a travel app just to distract myself. Paris popped up. A round-trip flight, cheaper than I expected. I laughed quietly, shaking my head. What was I even thinking? Traveling alone? During Christmas? But then my dad's voice echoed again in my mind. "You can skip this year." Maybe I would. I stared at the book flight button. My finger hovered over it for a long moment before I finally pressed it. My heart pounded, but I didn't feel scared. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to invite me to belong. I was choosing myself. Outside my window, the Christmas lights flickered softly through the curtains, familiar and distant all at once. I watched them glow until I fell asleep, wondering if, this time, starting my own tradition might be exactly what I needed. The next morning, I woke up with the same restless feeling I'd had all week, the kind that sits quietly in your chest, reminding you something needs to change. The confirmation email for my flight to Paris glowed on my phone screen. I stared at it, part of me thrilled, part of me terrified. I hadn't told my parents yet, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew how it would sound. Impulsive, immature, reckless. Maybe it was all those things, but for once, I didn't care. That evening, I decided to tell them. The living room was warm and quiet, filled with the soft sound of a Christmas movie playing in the background. Mom was knitting, and Dad was reading something on his tablet. I sat across from them, heart racing. "So, I've decided something," I said. Dad looked up, curious. What's that? I smiled, trying to sound calm. Since traditions are for parents, I paused, choosing my words carefully. I thought I'd start one of my own, in Paris. At first, they both laughed. They thought I was joking. But then I pulled out my passport and set it on the coffee table. The smile on Dad's face faded. You're serious? Yeah, I said, my voice steady even though my palms were sweating. I leave in 2 days. Mom blinked at me, speechless. Finally, she said, You're going alone? I nodded. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock. Then Dad leaned back, sighing. You really didn't have to do this, you know. We didn't mean... I know, I cut in gently. But I need this. For me. The conversation ended there. No yelling, no tears. Just a strange, heavy silence that followed me all the way to my room. That night, I started packing. Warm sweaters, my camera, a small travel journal, and a folded photo of my family. The one where we were all smiling under the Christmas tree a few years ago. I hesitated before slipping it into my bag. I wasn't angry at them, just disappointed that they didn't understand how much their words had hurt. 2 days later, I was standing in the airport. The air smelled like coffee and jet fuel, the sound of rolling suitcases echoing around me. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear this time. It was excitement. A quiet, brave kind of excitement. Before boarding, I sent a quick message to our family group chat. On my way to start my own tradition. Love you both. Then I turned off my phone and stepped onto the plane. When the plane lifted off, I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the city lights fade below. I should have felt sad, but I didn't. I felt free, like I was finally breathing again. As the clouds swallowed the view of home, I whispered to myself, this year, I'm not skipping Christmas. I'm rewriting it. The moment I stepped out of the airport in Paris, a cold breeze brushed against my face, carrying the smell of roasted chestnuts and something sweet, maybe pastries from a nearby cafe. Everything felt new. The sounds, the lights, the rhythm of people rushing past me, speaking a language that sounded like music. I didn't know a single soul here, and somehow, that made me feel alive. The first few days were quiet. I spent mornings walking through narrow cobblestone streets, watching strangers laugh over coffee at corner cafes. I'd stop to take photos, the kind of pictures that capture more than just a place. Little details, a child chasing pigeons, a couple sharing an umbrella, an old man sketching by the river. At first, I told myself I was just sightseeing. But deep down, I knew I was chasing something bigger, a version of myself I'd never met before. I rented a small room in a guest house near Montmartre. The walls were painted white, and the window looked out onto a street full of glowing Christmas lights. Every night, I'd fall asleep listening to the hum of the city below. Conversations, laughter, and the occasional car horn that somehow felt comforting instead of annoying. On my third day, I met Lucille and Theo, a kind older couple who ran a bakery around the corner. I'd gone in just to buy a croissant, but when they heard my accent and realized I was alone for Christmas, they insisted I stay for coffee. They spoke a mix of broken English and warm smiles. Somehow, I understood every word that mattered. Lucille told me, Christmas is not about place. It is about feeling home, even if home is inside you. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until she said it. They invited me to join a small Christmas Eve gathering they hosted every year for travelers and locals who had nowhere else to go. I said yes without thinking. That evening, I sat at a long wooden table surrounded by strangers who somehow felt like family. There was laughter, stories about faraway places, and the smell of cinnamon and butter drifting through the air. Someone played guitar, and a woman beside me started singing softly. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. While everyone was talking, I took out my phone and snapped a photo. The table full of food, the fairy lights glowing, the faces of people who had opened their hearts to me without even knowing my last name. Later that night, Lying in bed, I uploaded the photo to my Instagram story with the caption, "Sometimes you find family where you least expect it." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Messages from home. My mom had replied with a heart emoji. My dad wrote, "You look happy." I stared at his message for a long time. He was right. I was happy, but not because I had escaped them. I was happy because, for the first time, I had learned how to belong to myself. The next morning, I walked along the Seine River as snow began to fall. The Eiffel Tower shimmered in the distance and everything felt unreal. Quiet. Magical. Free. I thought about my parents, sitting under the tree back home, probably wondering if I'd call. I didn't. Not yet. I wanted them to feel what I had felt that night, the silence that makes you realize what truly matters. So I kept walking, smiling as snowflakes landed in my hair, my heart calm and light. I wasn't running from home anymore. I was building a new one memory, one heartbeat, one quiet moment at a time. Christmas Eve arrived faster than I expected. The city glowed like a dream. Every street strung with golden lights, every cafe window glowing with warmth. I wrapped myself in a scarf, grabbed my camera, and decided to wander. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to see Paris breathe at night. I walked along the Seine as snow fell softly over the bridges. Couples huddled together laughing. A street musician played a violin, the melody floating through the cold air. I stopped to listen for a while, smiling at how beautiful everything felt. Not perfect, but alive. Later, I met up with Lucille and Theo again. They had invited me back for their Christmas Eve dinner. Their bakery had closed early, but inside the air smelled of butter and sugar, and soft music played from a small radio. The table was covered with food, roasted chicken, bread still warm from the oven, and desserts I couldn't even name. There were other guests too, travelers like me. A student from Brazil, a young woman from Japan, an older man from Ireland. None of us knew each other, but the laughter came easily, as if we'd all been friends for years. At some point, Theo stood up, raised his glass, and said, "To those who find joy, even far from home." Everyone cheered. I felt tears sting my eyes as I lifted my glass too. After dinner, we stepped outside to watch the fireworks bursting over the Eiffel Tower. I took out my phone and snapped photos, my cheeks pink from the cold, sparks lighting up the night sky, people's faces glowing with happiness. Later, back in my room, I scrolled through the pictures. Every image felt like a little piece of freedom, proof that I had finally learned how to live for myself. I posted them all. The laughter, the food, the lights, the joy. The caption was simple. Maybe traditions are what you make them. I put my phone down and went to brush my teeth. When I came back, my notifications were going crazy. Messages, likes, comments. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years were writing things like, "This looks amazing," and "You're living the dream." And then I saw it, a message from Mom. "We just saw your photos. You look so beautiful. We miss you." Another one followed. "Dad said you always wanted to see Paris. He's smiling, but I think he misses you too." I swallowed hard. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Then my phone buzzed again. It was Dad. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I saw your photos. You look happy, really happy." I didn't know how to reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but nothing felt right. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to pretend the distance hadn't meant something. So I did what I always do when words fail. I took another photo. This one was of my view from the window. The quiet Paris street below, the snow still falling, the soft glow of Christmas lights in the glass. I sent it to him with a simple message. "I am Dad. Thank you." A few minutes passed before he replied. "We're proud of you. Just wish you were here." I smiled, a small, sad smile. Maybe for the first time they were seeing me not as the little girl who needed guidance, but as someone who could stand on her own. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone kept buzzing. More messages from relatives, friends, even coworkers saying they loved my photos. But the ones that mattered most were from my parents. They had finally seen what I needed them to see. That I wasn't lost. I was just finding my own way. I turned off my phone and stared out the window. Snowflakes drifted slowly through the air, landing on the rooftops below. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, welcoming Christmas morning. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I just felt understood. Christmas morning in Paris felt different from any other day I'd ever known. The city was quieter, softer. Snow covered the rooftops like powdered sugar, and the streets glowed faintly under the pale winter sun. I woke up to the sound of church bells echoing in the distance and the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery downstairs. Still half asleep, I reached for my phone. 17 new messages. I sat up slowly, already knowing who they were from. The first one was from Mom. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. We just opened gifts. It doesn't feel the same without you here." Then another, a few minutes later. "I made your favorite cookies, but they didn't taste right this year." I smiled softly. That was her way of saying, "I miss you." Then came Dad's message. Just a single photo. Our old Christmas tree glowing in the corner of the living room. Hanging front and center was my ornament, a little red heart with my name painted on it. Beneath it, he'd written, "It's not Christmas without you." My chest tightened. I blinked away the tears that suddenly filled my eyes. I sat there for a while, just staring at that photo. For years, I had tried so hard to be part of their world, to follow every tradition and expectation they placed on me. And when they brushed it off so easily, when Dad said, "You can skip this year," I thought maybe I didn't matter. But now, seeing that ornament still hanging on the tree, I realized something had shifted. They finally saw it. The empty space I left behind. More messages started coming in. A voice note from Mom, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "We're proud of you, honey. We didn't realize how much those moments meant to you until you weren't here to share them." Then another message from Dad. "I was wrong, you know. Traditions aren't just for parents. They're what hold us together." I pressed play again, listening to his voice softer than I'd ever heard it before. For a long time I just sat there, phone in hand, tears rolling down my cheeks. Not from sadness, but from something lighter. Forgiveness, maybe. I got dressed, wrapped my scarf around my neck, and stepped outside. The streets were peaceful. A few shops were open, and children ran past me, tossing snow at each other, their laughter echoing through the cold air. I found a small cafe near the river and ordered hot chocolate. The waiter placed it in front of me, the steam rising in soft curls. I pulled out my journal, the one I'd brought to write in but had barely touched. On the first empty page, I wrote, "Sometimes, you have to leave for people to see how much you mattered when you were there." I stared at the words for a long time, then smiled. My phone buzzed again, another message from Dad. This time it wasn't words, but a short video. I pressed play and heard laughter fill the speakers. It was my family, sitting around the tree. My cousin shouting, "We miss Hannah," and everyone waving at the camera. Then Dad's voice saying, "Next year, she's not skipping." I laughed through my tears. I took a selfie right there in the cafe. Messy hair, warm cup in my hands, Eiffel Tower faintly visible through the window behind me. I sent it to them with a simple message. Maybe next year, but this year I finally found my Christmas. A minute later, Mom replied with a heart emoji. Dad sent another message. "We'll be waiting, and we'll make new traditions together." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sat there, watching families pass by outside, each of them wrapped in their own small worlds of love and chaos. The waiter returned, setting down a small plate with a croissant. "Joyeux Noël," he said with a kind smile. "Merry Christmas." "Joyeux Noël," I whispered back. When I finished my drink, I walked along the river once more. The snow had stopped, and the water shimmered under the pale winter light. I thought about how scared I'd been before this trip, afraid of being alone, afraid of being forgotten. But instead, I'd found something much more powerful. I found peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, steady kind that settles in when you finally stop chasing people's approval. And as I watched the city come alive, I realized something simple. My dad was right in a way. Traditions do belong to parents, but sometimes you have to break them for your parents to understand their meaning. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself, next year will be different. Then I smiled, the real kind, and kept walking, the sound of my footsteps fading into the hum of a city that had somehow become my second home. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.